But these old fish in this river, they, whether it's a big creek arm on a big lake up in the Ozarks, or whether it's the California Delta and all that other stuff, fish relate to channels inside these backwater sloughs and the actual river channel that feeds them. In the spring of the year, we're talking about pre-spawn river fishing, and these fish get really predictable in that transition from their winter phase right up when they move in their pre-spawn deal and going into the winter. Probably the one area in this world that I know every inch of that I grew up fishing was from that bridge to that dam north. I spent hundreds and hundreds of hours playing with my father. And the things that I learned is, Mark Davis brought this up just a minute ago, and it's the most important question in fishing. He always said, every time you catch one, it's why. Well, every time I got in one of them sloughs, or every time I started trying to track down these pre-spawn fish, was why. It was always a question of why. On the Coosa River or any of these rivers, when you're looking for them in the pre-spawn, largemouth have tendencies, and spotted bass have tendencies. The spotted bass generally stay on the river. They live their whole life on that river. They very seldom ever migrate up into the creek arms or into the backwater sloughs. But what they do is they'll use different parts of the river most of the year, but in the pre-spawn, they like your rocks, your bluffs, your swings. We kind of covered that, but in that pre-spawn deal, they're also looking for where they're going to spawn. And what I call current seams is the deal in the river, whether it's largemouth or spotted bass in a pre-spawn. But these largemouth, generally speaking, they tend to make the move pre-spawn around 52 to 53 degrees. They'll start backing up in the mouths of the sloughs and up in the sloughs on this river. One of the biggest things that pushes these fish that I've learned through the years, I was talking to a gentleman in here a moment ago. He's talking about crappie fishing at Logan Martin. He's sitting right yonder, and he was asking me about how the crappie got there and where they went. He just knew that they were in this one particular deep slough in January, and then when it got to March, he couldn't figure out where they went. What's going on is the area that he was talking about fishing is a river. It's not really lake driven right there, it's river driven. And in the wintertime in the south, we get big rains, we get a lot of current. And that current, coupled up with cold water, our surface temps and all get really cold. Threadfin shad struggle. They can't live out there in that current. So they start trying to get out of the current. And to me, the biggest thing I learned about fishing the Coosa River and a lot of rivers was that when the shad start moving, we get very, very cold and we get a lot of current in the river. That forces these fish to start heading toward these backwater sloughs and these creeks. They're in there for a lot longer than what you realize they're in there. They're just they ain't active. They're cold. Because they just don't all of a sudden wake up and it's March and the surface temp 65 degrees and say, boys, we're going to the back. They were there a lot longer than what we realized they were there. And it's the same deal with the shad. I'm like a bass, whether it's spotted bass or largemouth. I get real predictable about 5 o'clock, 12 o'clock, and 8 o'clock. You can tell I don't miss many meals. And they're the same thing, it's cold. They don't eat very often in the wintertime in this pre-spawn deal, but they are going to eat. And if all the food source in this river has been blown out by the current, if the shad and the bluegill and everything is trying to seek shelter, getting in these backwater areas, the bass went with them. In this river deal, pre-spawn, once that water gets around that 52, 53, I love a spinnerbait. A spinnerbait on a spotted bass is pure poison. I don't think it's absolutely necessary to use crazy kind of colors. I will throw painted blades if the river's really, really off-colored, but white, chartreuse and white. And my general rule is in off-colored water, I throw gold blades, and in clear water, I throw nickel. Everybody's got their own choices, but that's just always seemed to be a good guide for me to work off of. Crankbaits on pre-spawn spotted bass is the deal. that probably one of the best I've ever seen at current fishing is a 7A bomb. I don't know why they bite that thing, or a 200 Bandit. I'm not sponsored by either company, but you just ain't gonna go wrong. This on this particular river, they a Norman deep little end fished on the face of these bluffs and these outside turns. It seems like that in that pre-spawn deal, that 8 to 10 foot deal, depth range, is real critical. You get above it, you won't get them. You get below it, you won't get them. You can grind a big bait into that rock, but it seems like it. Everything in that river, they want something naturally ticking along. A rattle bait here on any of these rivers, on these bars, is dynamite. I think it's an underutilized bait for spotted bass on the river. Because a lot of these current seams, you could take a 1/2 ounce lipless, whether it's a Strike King red eye or rattle trap or whoever it is, and you know, you just have to play with it. But reds is always real good in February on the pre-spawn, seems like. But on spotted bass, the chartreuse baits and the shad color baits, the chrome baits work really, really good. But it's all about fishing that.
Welcome to Bass University TV, an online video training course where you'll learn champion bass fishing techniques from pro anglers Pete Glusek, Mike Iaconelli, and their talented special guests. From on the water to in the classroom, you'll learn sound techniques and strong fundamental bass fishing skills. Watch hours of video content on multiple topics at your own pace for a low monthly fee. Cancel at any time. Information is power in the sport of fishing, so learn from the very best. Subscribe to Bass University TV today.